To talk solutions and look ahead to recovery, I talked with Joel Griffith. He's a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation focused on financial regulations. I wonder if you anticipate that this is a temporary sort of partial bounce back, that it might go back and get worse again before it gets better because, case counts are climbing and governors are ordering businesses to shut down again. I mean, is this temporary?
Last month, that 4.8 million jobs, we'd never seen that many jobs created in a single month. And that comes on top of the record from last month, which was over 2 million in that month alone. I think what's really interesting, if you look at that 4.8 million, and it goes to what you asked about whether or not it's temporary, of that 4.8 million, 2.5 million basically came from the retail sector or the service sector. And of that, 1.5 million jobs are focused in the restaurant industry. So a big part of this rebound is due to the fact that governors and mayors are giving the green light for people to go back to work. And we're seeing that when you get the green light for these businesses to open, it turns out that the majority of Americans are actually ready to go back to work. They're ready to shop. They're ready to go to the restaurants. Business is thriving, and we're seeing that play out in these unemployment or in the jobless numbers.
We are seeing a higher unemployment rate among minority communities. Is there potentially targeted relief there that could help those communities in particular?
Well, some of the minority communities are concentrated often in some of these larger urban areas, and sadly, is some of these cities that have had some of the most severe shutdown orders and have been some of the slowest to reopen. I'm thinking of New York City, of course, Detroit, Michigan, LA to some extent has been slower than elsewhere to reopen. So what we need to see number one, of course, mayors be able to safely reopen. But once we're able to safely reopen, by all means, let's get those doors open. And sadly, I think you've seen some mayors move far too slowly, and that is disproportionately impacting some minority groups.
Finally, even before this crisis, there were pockets of the country where almost a quarter of residents were a paycheck away from poverty. This crisis, I imagine, has potential to compound that, to make that worse in the long run. What's the solution there that could cushion the blow and prevent this from making that even worse, and maybe even propel us in a little bit better of a situation coming out of it?
Yeah, that is so important. I know there was a Federal Reserve report that came out, I think it was last year, that showed just such a large number of individuals and families have less than $500 in savings or in a checking account. And really, if you lose your job or you have a financial crisis in a situation like that, especially if you don't have access to credit, that really makes for a difficult circumstance. So that really goes to the importance of being able to learn on the job, being able to progress within the workplace so you can earn more, and that there is such a big gap. And this goes away from some of the COVID-19 crisis, but there's such a gap in high school and even in college in teaching basic financial management. There is a failure on the part of a lot of our public schools to teach that to students. And when they leave, and if they don't have a family teaching them those basic skills, that means they are overextending themselves, getting themselves into debt. And when they do have an emergency, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's a more typical emergency, such as a health emergency, you can see people set back years. But this is a failure of our education system.
I remember learning how to write out a check in school, and that was just about the only personal finance education I remember getting. Joel Griffith, it's great to have your insight on a day like today, especially a busy day for you. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me.
With all that in mind, several states are pausing or even reversing their plans to reopen. Right now, the rate of case climb is quickening in 40 of 50 states. Take a look at this. This comes from the New York Times. The U.S. added more than 50,000 cases yesterday, blowing away the record in April of about 36,000. I mean, you look back at that first hump when we thought things were as bad as they were going to get. We were wrong. You can see over the last 2 weeks, that line showing the 7-day average of new cases is steep and climbing. It is much steeper in places like Arizona, Texas, Nevada, Florida.